All right. Hopefully I am live, but hi everyone. So I am Matt McCarthy. I'm Vice Chair of the Academic Senate, and I am delighted to welcome all of you to this co-sponsored event with the TLC. You're going to hear from Robin Duncan in just a moment. So it's clear AI is here to stay. We're all clear on that part. But most of the focus, both in teaching as well as in the press and all kinds of things, seems like it's been mainly its dangers, from plagiarism and cheating to robo writing and robo products of all kinds. But as you'll see, the focus of the session is really quite different. It's starting to think about the enormous potential to both expand and enrich how we teach across multiple disciplines. And I have to say, as a past chair of COT, I'm incredibly excited about this. So we're clearly only at the beginning here, and I personally am really interested in undergraduate, but also the potential for grad teaching and research at, even at every level. And I'm super delighted that the TLC is already really engaged with this. It's something that is going to cross multiple Senate areas and committees. And it's likely to be on the proactive agendas for years to come. And we're really, really looking forward to working very closely in partnership with the TLC as we go forward to this brave new world. So, Robin.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. I'm really delighted to be able to welcome you all today to our second event in this year's Teaching Week, the Forum on Generative AI, as you all know. My name is Robin Duncan. I'm the Faculty Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. As Matt noted, Gen AI has been something that has evoked worry and also excitement from instructors on our campus and really across the nation. At the TLC, we've been approaching supporting our campus community around Gen AI by offering a learning community last fall. And you're going to get the pleasure of actually hearing from many of those faculty that participated in that learning community today. We're also really pleased to be able to announce today that we're going to continue that learning community on into spring quarter. And we're going to be inviting instructors and staff that are interested in developing an AI intervention for their courses or for courses that they support, having other colleagues give them feedback about it, and also having an opportunity to test their intervention with their colleagues. We will be putting information up about this new opportunity up on our website soon. And the community will be facilitated by Heather Shearer, who you're going to hear from today, as well as Michael Tassio, who is co-hosting today's event. We're also going to be releasing in spring quarter a new resource that's going to help instructors think about and modify how they implement frequent low stakes assessments in their courses in light of new Gen AI tools that I know many of us are concerned about that make some of our go-to assessment tools less accessible and less useful because they really open them up to cheating. So I will be excited to be able to release that to the campus coming up in the spring. So Gen AI, like most technologies, and Matt noted this, that it brings both its challenges, but also its opportunities. And it's clear that it's going to be with us and our students throughout their careers. I'm excited about today's event because, as Matt noted, we're going to get to hear about some of the interesting ways our faculty on our campus are really thinking about using Gen AI in the classrooms, and some of the challenges, of course, that it poses. So I hope you enjoy hearing today from our colleagues and what this looks like in their classrooms. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so good to see so many people here. We're at 107 now, and we're so grateful that you're taking time out of your busy days to attend this forum for Teaching Week. I'm going to start by just doing an overview of the program. I'll have a few words after that, and then we're going to jump right into presentations. Okay, for today's event, we are going to start with about 20 minutes, so very short talks. These will be presentations from members of the Teaching and Learning Center's AI learning community, which took part in fall of this academic year. Really grateful for the folks we'll hear from. That's going to be followed by a presentation of CIT findings on graduate student use of generative AI. And there's some really interesting findings there that we think you'll really want to dive deeper into in the Q&A period. And then whoops. And then we'll have a panel discussion on the state of generative AI and computer science education. And then we'll invite questions from all of you. I'm sorry, I forgot to announce myself. I'm Michael Tassio, Assistant Vice Provost for Educational Innovation. And I think for a lot of you as educators, ChatGPT quickly came onto the scene in November of 2022, and it instantly felt disruptive. Students were early adopters, as they are with a lot of technologies, and some of the uses weren't ethical, or at least not in the best interest of student learning. As many of us know, GPT makes the possibility of cheating much easier. The release of GPT follows a difficult time for educators. The pandemic forced many of us to engage in unfamiliar ways with new technologies and to learn how to use them and to make mistakes in a context of a lot of urgency, not a good context for learning. As vaccinations then gave forth to a pathway to returning to in-person instruction, we struggled with what the Chronicle for Higher Education refers to as the crisis of student disengagement. Students, for many reasons, weren't showing up to class. And this is really the messy context in which GPT became publicly available. I hear daily from educators and from my colleagues that are growing impatient with being, as we say, adaptable to these changing circumstances. And so I just want to take a moment to recognize how hard it is to be an educator amongst all of this change. And I think it's really important that we recognize and celebrate, as we're doing during this teaching week, the playfulness and creativity, the innovation, and above all, the care that UCSC educators are putting towards their students. So thank you, faculty, grad students, researchers, the instructional support staff. Your contributions are contributing to a greater purpose. We're really grateful. We couldn't do this event without some particular support. Diana Hogg of University Relations has been incredible, and we couldn't do it without her. From the Academic Senate, we're grateful for Michelle Chamberlain's effort, as well as Dr. Rebecca Hurtis. From the TLC, all of our staff have been involved, and I want to give a special thanks to Julia, Erin, Dana, Robin, Megan, Sam, and Sid, who are all regular contributors to the AI learning community. Thank you all. Okay. Zach and I are really proud of creating a learning community that welcomed both faculty and instructional support staff. In this learning community, we gave opportunity for faculty to showcase their contributions and experiences. And for this event, we're bringing 3 back. I'll just say a few words about each. Heather Shear is a teaching program in the writing program whose scholarship centers on rhetoric, organizational communication, activity theory, and visual design of information. I've known of Heather for years through the lore of how she teaches, including that she engages with students to think critically about writing and doing textual analysis through the tearing up of writing and stitching it back together in a very tactile way. Thank you, Heather. We'll then hear from Josefina Bitar, an assistant professor in the Department of Languages and Applied Linguistics, whose scholarship focused on syntactic influences between Spanish and Paraguayan Guarani, the 2 official languages from her home country. We're really excited to see Josefina here, in part because GPT-like tools are very good at doing language translation and really disruptive in that field of study. Finally, we'll hear from Dana Kennard, an educational technology specialist in the Teaching and Learning Center. Dana is someone who many of you have worked with. I'm sure she's helped you in some ways with your courses. And Dana is someone who always looks out for supporting students with disabilities. And she's going to talk about some of the accessibility work that she's done with GPT. So without further ado, we are going to transition to Heather presenting.
Thanks very much. All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is put some links into the chat, and I'll be referring to these items as I present, and so hopefully you'll be able to follow along. And I'm also going to share my screen. All right, so hopefully that's coming through okay. So my adventures with generative AI started very recently. Basically, when I participated in the AI learning community this past fall, thanks to Michael and Zach and Robin and everybody who put that together. And since that time, I've been experimenting with using generative AI tools, mainly ChatGPT, but also one called Claude, C-L-A-U-D-E, like the name that I learned about in those sessions, to enhance in-class activities and course assignments. And today I'll share 3 small ways I've been using ChatGPT-4 to enhance work in Writing 2, Rhetoric and Inquiry, which is a writing course with a focus on, as the name implies, improving one's writing by learning about rhetoric and producing research-based texts. So this slide that you see here, if you look at the item at the first link that I put into the chat, you can see the full text that goes with it. I found value in using generative AI to improve some of the interactive scenarios that I use in class. So for example, just after midterm in fall 2023, when students' energies were flagging, I used ChatGPT to help me generate a lighthearted in-class activity. It looks a little grim from the photo, but it was quite fun. That prodded students to think about and apply key rhetorical concepts such as genre, purpose, style, audience, and delivery, things we've been working with all quarter. And I often use scenario-based activities in class as a warm-up for more challenging work, or as in this case, for a bit of productive fun. But using ChatGPT-4 helped me create what I think is a better activity and do so more quickly. And so specifically, I was able with this one to generate a slightly dramatic image you can see here to accompany the scenario, which was inspired, by the way, of a killing by coyotes of a deer in my neighborhood. And with ChatGPT's help, I was also able, and you'll see this on page 2 of the handout, to create a pretty big number of personas from which students could choose to complete the activity. Normally, I would only generate something like 3 or 4 personas, but it was easy to create more using the AI tool. And a surprising number of students elected to be Tara, the campus turkey, in the in-class activity, which ended up being a pretty big hit in class. Similarly, I've used some of the same tools to enhance some of my more standard assignments. So for example, I use ChatGPT-4 to create, if you scroll down to the second page of the link number 2, the item at link number 2 in the chat, you'll see part of the final exam that I give in class. So part 1 in that final exam asks students to create a proposal for an imaginary conference, and you can see that call on page 2. And so I use ChatGPT-4 to create the image and also to help me come up with the theme for the conference. So a quick bit of context for those unfamiliar with a D20, I've got one here I can show you. So it's a 20-sided die used for tabletop gaming. And I give students in Writing 2 one of these. They get their own at the start of every quarter. And it's a reminder to them to move away from simplistic thinking, the pro-con thinking, the right-wrong thinking, the every topic has only 2 sides thinking, and to engage in analysis. And so that's why that's referenced in the conference title. A final way that I've been using it, and this is probably the most interesting way to me right now, is to help students with discrete parts of the writing and research process. And so if you take a look at the third link that I provided, it will take you to an assignment that I've recently used. And so I want to note here that I do in my classes have an AI policy that permits certain uses of generative AI and prohibits others. And if anybody would like to see that, contact me after this event and I'd be happy to share it with you. But because this policy is nuanced, I found it helpful to help students understand the nuance, and hence my integration of specific generative AI activities into the class that deal with the writing and research process. I didn't used to integrate these into class. I used to leave it up to students' discretion to sort of figure out, based on what I'd written in my policy, what was right and what wasn't so great. But I found out that they were having a pretty difficult time navigating that. And so in essence, my goal as a teacher is to help them figure out, as writers and researchers, when something like generative AI can be helpful, but where it crosses the line into undermining them. And so now we spend a little bit of time working together to figure out what that is. One of the great uses of generative AI I've discovered is helping students get through certain sticking points with writing and research, like developing keywords for their research. And so you can see in link number 3 an activity that I've pulled together from sources on the internet and from talking with colleagues that help them do this. And this is where I see the most potential as I think of the future, which is making these really small interventions to help students get started or get through sticking points. So to sum up, I've found generative AI to be helpful in creating or enhancing scenarios, for developing visuals and maybe some basic text for assignments, and for helping students to undertake specific parts of the writing and research process. So thanks so much for listening.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Okay, so last quarter I was teaching 2 courses, and I was also part of the AI learning community. That was really, really fun. So I decided I was gonna experiment a little bit, but only in one of the courses. And so I was teaching a discourse analysis course, and I decided because a lot of people were presenting really cool activities in the learning community, I decided, okay, I want to be cool too, and design this like very simple activity. Basically, I asked students to read this text that gave definitions like for warnings, threats, advice, and promises. So this scholar defined, what is a warning, what is a threat, what is a piece of advice, and things like that. And I told students, okay, ask ChatGPT to write a warning, to write a threat, to write a piece of advice, and to write a promise. And then what they had to do is they had to compare ChatGPT's text or warnings and threads and so on to the definition. And they had to say, oh, like if we consider, Jones's definition of warning is ChatGPT's warning example, a good example of warning. So they had to do that in class, and then they did that with apologies as well. And that was really fun. It went really well, and students were engaged because I think one good thing about ChatGPT is that it is fun. And even myself, when I was designing this activity, I spent like 2 or 3 hours just playing with it. So I think it went well because students had to refer to the reading to answer the questions. So students were engaging with the reading, and they had to read the text, even if they hadn't read it at home, which is what they were supposed to do. They were reading it in class, or like engaging with it in class. Because they had to evaluate the texts that were created by ChatGPT, and they had to use technical vocabulary. And if they weren't using this vocabulary when explaining their answers, like I would try to elicit that vocabulary. Like, remember, we talked like remember, speech act is this, or register, and all those terms that we use in discourse analysis. And I think part of why it went well is because it was in class and I was able to monitor the activity. And of course, it was collaborative, and people were sharing and their answers and comparing, and that was fun. Now that's a good that's the good part. That's the fun part of ChatGPT. Now the not so fun part is I also teach language courses. So I was teaching an upper division Spanish course, which is not a very typical language course because, well, it is assumed that everyone speaks Spanish. Everyone is like highly fluent in Spanish. And my approach in this class was to ignore ChatGPT at all. And I thought, well, if my assignments in class are low stake, then students won't use ChatGPT because, I mean, why? And if I have them refer to their own experiences in their writing, then they won't use ChatGPT. I was wrong. In these like low stake weekly assignments, I would still see what I thought were texts created by AI, and it was easy. I'm gonna say, yeah, easy to tell that students were using ChatGPT because I saw no mistakes. Even though this is an upper division Spanish course, because many of the students have Spanish as their second language or as a heritage language, I'm used to reading text in Spanish with mistakes, and some of these had no mistakes at all. Excessive use of scientific terminology. So like some terms that we were not even learning in class. Like I would see them on those texts, and those texts used in a very strange way, not very in a not very accurate way. And the responses, of course, were very similar. This was true in particular when I asked them to write a summary of an article. All the summaries were pretty much the same. And then, of course, a big one is the big discrepancy between students' oral fluency in the language and the writing quality. And I'm sure that's not true, not only like in language courses, but like in other courses where you see, okay, the student seems to master this in writing, but not, in class. So what I would change is I don't think I will ever ask students to write a summary of a reading ever again. I think I would have them, for instance, evaluate ChatGPT's summary of a reading, because that will force them to engage with the reading, like in the discourse analysis course. And I think it's very important that students learn that skill, the evaluation part of using ChatGPT, because I think I'm concerned about plagiarism, but I'm more concerned about students thinking that ChatGPT is flawless and that whatever that ChatGPT produces is good, which is, of course, we all know it's not the case. And this, I'm not sure about this yet, but I think I'm gonna try having students write a brief piece in class on a piece of paper. Haven't seen handwritten things in a long time, but I think I'm gonna do that at least at the beginning of the quarter to sort of establish a baseline. And then when I see what students, their text later on, I could see, okay, this text doesn't sound like this person, or like what this person wrote in class. So yeah, that's it for me. And I'll take any of your questions later. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Connard from the TLC. I have been uploading images to ChatGPT and asking it to generate alt text for those images. So let me explain briefly what alt text is so we're on the same page. Alt text, or alternative text, often abbreviated as alt text, is a text description of an image which is embedded within the code of a web page. Primarily, the purpose of alt text is to provide a text representation of visual content, like images for individuals who are low vision or blind, including users who rely on screen readers. Adding alt text to images is incredibly crucial in making web content accessible for everyone. There's other benefits of alt text, which include alt text will show up even if the image doesn't load for whatever reason, and also by associating text and keywords with an image, the image resource has better search engine optimization. Effective alt text is descriptive, it's succinct, and most importantly, it conveys the meaning or purpose of the image itself. So what I'm doing, late last year, ChatGPT 4 introduced image upload, and I immediately saw a use case in providing alt text for images. I posted to our TLC Slack space and invited our community members to post on our accessibility channel to receive alt text for any images that might have needed it. I gave those instructions to ChatGPT 4, I ask it for alt text, and then I share that back with the instructor along with instructions on how to add alt text to their Canvas page, to their Google slide, or their PowerPoint, because I don't know where they need it from or what they might be using it for. I've illustrated this process on this slide. This is a doodle of me handing a picture to what I imagine AI to be. Of course, I also asked ChatGPT to provide an alt text for this image too, which I've pasted at the bottom and I'll read out loud. Whimsical line drawing that appears to be done in chalk, featuring an anthropomorphized computer monitor with 4 arms and tiny little legs. The monitor has a silly face with an open mouth chomping on an image. The other arms wave wildly. One holds another picture. To the right, one arm presents the word text as its output. Of course, this is just starting alt text for both this image and for the instructors. There are, of course, things that might be contextually important that generative AI or myself providing the alt text for the instructor don't know about the image, especially as it relates to the topic or lesson. So of course, it's recommended that the instructor edits where needed. It's going really well so far. Asking for alt text is relatively easy with non-complex images like a silly little doodle. I did have an interesting challenge when an instructor asked for help with an image that depicted physics ideas and math notations. Creating alt text like this always makes you evaluate what parts of an image need to be communicated explicitly and very clearly for someone to have complete understanding just based on that description. For me, this also brought up how to best represent equations or math equations in alt text, because they have to be plain text to be readable by HTML or screen readers. So you can't rely on superscript or subscript formats. How this is beneficial or how this work has been impactful. For our students with disabilities, especially with those using assistive technology like a screen reader, it gives these students the autonomy of their own learning and reduces their dependency on others for access to their course materials. For the instructors, adding alt text makes their course materials more accessible for all their current and future students. It also leads to thoughtful consideration about the use and value of adding visual content in their educational material. And for our community, this is encouraging a culture of inclusivity. It promotes best practices for digital accessibility. It makes us all aware of what alt text is, why it's important, and how to add it to images. So right now, those interested can post in our Slack channel or email me. That's all I got. I'm going to drop a link to join our Slack space in the chat.
Thank you so much, Dana. I really appreciate that. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Zach Zimmer now, who will introduce Lance Mendoza.
Yes, thank you very much, Michael, and thanks to all the participants of the AI learning community. It was really a fabulous experience, and I encourage people, if you're interested in any of these projects, to consider joining in the spring. I'm chairing the Academic Senate's IT committee, CIT, the Committee on IT, and I have the great privilege of working closely with Lance Mendoza, who is the graduate student representative on CIT this year. I'm going to introduce Lance, and then he is going to give us the results of a survey that he did, that he circulated with the grad students to get some information on their experiences and perspectives on AI. Lance is in his second year as a master's student in the computational media department, studying educational video game development, and his research interests include augmented reality, virtual reality technology, human robotics interaction, and educational technology. So I turn it over to you, Lance.
Thank you so much, Zach. Let's share my screen. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the Committee on Information Technology Survey on AI Technology and Education. So here's a little bit of background on the survey. The Committee of Information and Technology for this year's academic school year sent a student survey to better understand how the graduate student population were using AI technology and to gather their opinion on the use of AI technology within UCSC to help with their education and activities. The total number of survey respondents was 86. The survey was open from January to February 2024. The survey was anonymous and participants did not receive any compensation. So with this survey, the CIT committee set out to gather student feedback and address these four objectives. One, to assess the current AI technology usage pattern among students, to investigate student perception of integration of AI into their learning experience, including benefits and ethical concerns, to develop an understanding of students' opinions regarding the significance of AI in educational settings, and lastly, to determine whether students desire an active role in establishing academic AI use policies at UCSC. So here are the key themes we found when the survey results came in. There are significant amounts of students using AI within UC Santa Cruz. Students have integrated AI into their experience by streamlining tasks such as coding, learning, writing, and research. They recognize the benefits of AI as a productivity tool for simplifying daily tasks, but also express worries about plagiarism, reliance on AI, and devaluation of labor. Acknowledging that AI will continue to develop and gain prominence, making it important for students to be exposed in its social analysis as well as its critical perspectives, and not how to make it. Students desire an input when AI is used in their education. Acknowledging collaborative decision-making on AI enhances the learning experience. So here are our demographic results. The survey was successful as we were able to gather graduate student opinions broadly from computer science, computational media, psychology, astronomy, and physics, and a wider representation from other categorical majors. So here's our quantitative results on how often students use AI. A large majority of students rated using AI to help within their daily life as roughly 1/3 very frequently and frequently, occasionally more than 1/4, and roughly 1/3 said very rarely and never. For the results of how students are using AI, students are using AI for tasks such as generating art, debugging code, improving writing, learning new concepts, research, and creative projects. The key word that stands out among students is that AI helps with efficiency. Students are using AI efficiently with their overall learning, programming, writing, and overall understanding concepts and ideas. The most popular AI engine students use is ChatGPT. So here are some paraphrase highlights students use AI for, which include improving coding quality, enhancing internet researches, expository writing, generating art, life coaching, helping with math, transcription, and translation. AI isn't perfect, but students have found a way to make their work more efficient than what they had been doing before AI exploded with ChatGPT. For the results of if students had any ethical concerns about the use of AI, the majority of concerns brought up were how students were using AI in their educational development. Graduate students who teach undergrads were highlighting how students may not be learning and working on specific skills, but instead are relying on AI to go around problems. Students highlighted a range of perspective with students expressing worries about plagiarism or reliance on AI and the potential devaluation of labor. They acknowledged that the need for education AI and its limitation, as well as the significance of understanding biases in AI models. Response included concerns in user naivety regarding the limitations of AI and validity of AI responses, the misuse of AI for propaganda and misinformation. AI is a crutch in research or creative activity versus assistance in mundane tasks, balancing attribution and copyright issues against the benefits of AI. Several respondents stressed the importance of AI-focused instructions in promoting ethical use and development of AI. Even with these concerns, students still acknowledge that for the sake of technological progress, it is also important for copyright claims not to hinder technological enhancements for our daily life. For the results of how important do you think it is for students to learn about AI, students' opinions varied, with some emphasizing the need for formal training and understanding AI as a tool, while others questioned its necessity or expressed concerns about its impact on industries. The survey was a free-form survey, but respondents' answers were very similar, so I made a pie chart out of it. A large majority rated that students should learn how to use AI as extremely important and very important, equating to more than 1/3. Fairly important and not important, less than 1/4. So here are some key takeaways from our survey questions of how important it is for students to learn about AI. Several respondents emphasized the need for instruction providing AI literacy, given that AI will play an increasingly important role in our lives. Training an effective and appropriate use of AI would reduce over-reliance on AI. One respondent noted that potential of AI to increase accessibility and equity. One respondent expressed the perception that discussion of AI is currently taboo in academia, despite almost universal use of AI among students. A few respondents expressed concerns how instructions about AI and large language models should only be provided by instructors with deep knowledge of the underlying technology, while some contradicted that only STEM majors needed to know the underlying technology. In regards to the question, do you feel students should have a say in how AI is used in their educational setting? There were mixed opinions, with some students believing that students should have a say in AI usage, while others felt that decisions should be made by experts. The overall consensus was that yes, 70% of students said they should have a say on how AI should be used in their education, while 23% of respondents took on an unsure middle ground, and 7% of the respondents said no. So here are a few paraphrased statements of what students said about students providing input on how AI is used in their education. One student elaborated how students are put at risk when instructors use AI to evaluate their work, highlighting the loss of privacy and control of creative content and the reduced accuracy of assessments. Students should be included in the conversation about the use of AI and know when it is being used. Another student said, open communication about AI used by students, faculty, and staff could increase mutual trust and guide implementation of effective pedagogic and administrative approaches. An overwhelming majority of respondents stressed the importance of students' inputs, while opinions were divided regarding the appropriate amount of decision-making power by students at various academic career stage. Better informed students will make better contributions to policy decision, thus training in AI use and ethics is essential. So here are the key takeaways from the survey. A strong majority of respondents use AI to enhance their learning and research and to optimize their workflow in their academic setting and daily life. A small but significant portion of the respondents do not use AI as they have not found it useful, do not care about it, or they don't know how to use it. 80% of the respondents believe that UC Santa Cruz should offer classes on AI, design and appropriate use of AI. And 70% of the respondents emphasized the importance of students' involvement in the development of UC Santa Cruz AI policies and transparency in decision-making. Thank you to the UC Academic Senate and the Committee of Information Technology and the graduate student population for your invaluable feedback. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Lance. Will you just hang around for 1 second? And I just want to say that the Q&A is open for the participants in the AI learning community, for Lance, and for our other panelists. And we're going to bring everyone back at the end of the event this afternoon, so you'll be able to direct questions to them. But there are a couple specific questions that maybe, Lance, you can just answer right now. I know that we're not able to circulate the survey among undergraduate student populations because we currently don't have a undergraduate representative on CIT right now, but I think, Lance, you'd be happy to share your materials if the undergrads want to circulate the survey themselves.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. And if there was a little bit of confusion if the ethical concerns question was selecting from a menu or if it was open-ended.
Oh, yes. So it was an open-ended question. But because I think participants' responses was so similar, we sort of clamped them up.
Yeah, they were very clustered. So thank you very much. And there is incredible interest in this. And so, Lance, do you think we can work to maybe make some of the slides about the findings available after the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Lance. And Lance will be back at the end if you have any more specific questions for him. And I just really appreciate hearing that perspective from the graduate students. And there are some real profound questions, I think, that they are posing for us and that we can think about as faculty. So I really appreciate that. And I do want to say that much of and so I am Zach Zimmer. I'm an associate professor of literature. I've participated in the AI learning community. And as we've heard, a lot of the initial and early concerns about large language models in the wake of the release of ChatGPT focused on issues of student use of these new technosystems to maybe cheat on assignments, as we heard from some people. I didn't really like that framework for several reasons, the foremost of which is that it conceived of the classroom as a space of policing, enforcement, and surveillance. And I think one of the reasons that we're here today in this joint forum held during UCSC's Teaching Week with the Academic Senate and the Teaching and Learning Center co-sponsoring the event is to try to refocus our conversation about AI in the classrooms to create some space for inquiry, experimentation, and critique, as you're seeing today. But if there's one thing that I took away from our AI learning community, it is this. GPT, LLMs, these are just one more of the many challenges that we face in our classrooms. It is not an existential threat to pedagogy. And I say this with confidence as it relates to the teaching of writing, because the solution to LLM usage in the writing classroom is the same solution to the perpetual problem or challenge of teaching college writing. And that is that teaching writing and critical thinking works best in small seminar settings with the support of a writing center and the honest possibility of failing the course. These conditions combine to render the plagiarism problem obvious and addressable, whatever the source, be it an LLM, or be it an old-fashioned paper mill, or be it just student copying. The only problem here is that this solution requires and demands significant resources. Now, as a literature professor, I can answer that question confidently for the humanities classroom, but I've also realized that these LLMs offer a true novelty in their ability to teach us humans how to interact with computational systems. I like to say that code is the native language of these systems. So, how are these LLMs and other technosystems showing up in our computer science and engineering classrooms? In order to answer those questions, I'd like to introduce two members of the CSE department who will talk about just that. Luca De Alfaro is a professor in the Computer Science and Engineering Department, and since joining UCSC in 2001, he's worked on a wide variety of topics ranging from logic and game theory to reputational systems, fake news, fair AI, and a field that Luca calls computational ecology. He was also instrumental in creating some of the content of the basic programming course sequences for freshmen at UCSC and teaches a popular web applications class. He built two tools used in teaching here at Santa Cruz, CrowdGrader for peer grading and Notebook Grader for grading Python notebooks. We're also joined today by Marcelo Sierra. Marcelo is a lecturer in UCSC's Computer Science and Engineering Department and also the CEO of Idea Sierra Labs. Idea Sierra Labs provides consulting expertise to Silicon Valley firms. Marcelo brings 30 plus years of broad-based experience in computer engineering. He received his master's degree in computer engineering, emphasizing design and applications of deep learning accelerators, and has extensive industry experience along with being a beloved educator here on campus. So thank you both for being here. Very happy to have you with us. And I just wanted to start off, and maybe we can go to Luca first and then to Marcelo. What classes have you taught since the launch of ChatGPT, and how are you using LLMs and similar technologies in your classrooms? What interests you about using these systems in your teaching? We'll go to Luca first.
Yeah, so I've taught my web applications class, and I've had students, in fact, build web applications that interface to LLMs, ChatGPT in particular. Some applications were a lot of fun. For example, you could tell the ingredients you had at home, and they would tell you how to cook them into recipes and things like that. Very, very nice applications. And I've also followed in my role of sort of coach for some of our lecturers, what is happening in our introductory sequence in CSE 20 and 30, our basics Python courses, where I've built this grading tool to which I've recently added essentially LLM-based feedback to student work, with which I'm still at a very experimental stage. And so, you know, those are two very different experiences, because in the high-level web application course, essentially LLMs have been a great facilitator of student productivity. So that my main challenge there is how to harness this incredible productivity enhancement in order to enable students to learn even faster and produce better apps. And in the more elementary courses, I think the challenges are different. They are also they're more related to what kind of feedback the students want or can receive, and also how to ensure that they learn the basics, even though LLMs are as good or better than them at doing the basics, because, you know, the students are learning and the LLMs have been trained already in a sense. So the two courses offer two very different perspectives, I would say.
Well, thank you very much, Luca. And Marcelo, what are you seeing in your classroom?
So I taught a class in embedded programming, which the class was originally developed by Jose Reynaud, and he took a kind of a pioneering view of it to provide starter code using ChatGPT and then have the students correct the code. And so the class is project oriented, and it had 8 very challenging projects. And I think in a sense, this idea, this approach proved itself successful in that most of the class passed the course. It's a very challenging course. It involves communication protocols, programming in C in a cross communication environment. So the course proved successful. Now, in its implementation, I found certain challenges. Jose developed this style where the way he would teach a course is he would have ChatGPT create a starter code, and then he would improvisationally fix the code in the class, illustrating how, wow, you can just do this pretty quickly. Now, I end up finding that approach kind of challenging for me because sometimes I would have ChatGPT generate some code and it was pretty bad. And then I would be struggling to get it to go in the end. And then it sort of was kind of a disappointing result in that instead of showing how easy it is, it can show, well, this can be challenging. But at the same time is a real experience. So from the standpoint of how important this is, I consider it really important because I happen to be of the belief that this is a new technology that engineers are going to basically have to use in the near future. It's sort of like, I don't think there's going to be a choice in the matter if you don't adopt the ability to use a technology like modern AI for coding and for many different tasks. I think engineers are going to fall behind. So from that standpoint, I think it's very important to develop this approach to engineering and to train our students in it.
Luke, I couldn't tell if you wanted to jump in. Oh,
no, it's
okay.
Fine.
Well, so this is really interesting hearing the on the one hand the drive towards productivity and efficiency in coding, but on the other hand, Marcelo, your example of the code coming up and actually not being good. And so I'm wondering how in the classroom you think you're going to be handling those beyond the live demo and showing students the limitations, but what does it actually mean to be integrating these tools that can, in a certain sense, allow for greater productivity, but also that can generate code that is not model code, not code that we want our students to be taught? How do you navigate that?
Well, it's funny. I make a reference to ChatGPT as being an idiot savant, where I focus on the savant. It's like it kind of speaks English. It sort of passes the Turing test, but it makes big mistakes to somebody that has enough savvy to recognize the mistakes. Quite often, the mistakes it makes are not like readily apparent. So in a way, like in another course I'm teaching, I started trying to use ChatGPT to generate some code and ask some questions. And I found out that it comes back with bad code. Now I can tell it's bad code because I can reason and I can say, well, that won't work, right? But if you're not savvy, you won't be able to recognize that. So in fact, I'm thinking of adding one of those communications as a part of a quiz to say, will this code work? Why won't it work? So, and illustrating the weakness of a tool like ChatGPT. That said, what I fear is that we can't be too nonchalant about the fact that ChatGPT makes a lot of mistakes. And that in a way is perhaps a greater concern than the opposite, because we have to a little bit understand in the future where humans and machines are going to fit in this ecosystem, and how the two of us together, machines and humans, are going to basically coexist for the benefit of the creators of artificial intelligence. So I think this, and by the way, one thing that I like about this seminar is to see that we're starting to use AI in the humanities, because I think that is something else that's coming. And as engineers, we have to figure out a little bit how this ecosystem is going to work for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Very much in the spirit of the event. Luca, anything you wanted to add to that? Specifically about this, the problem of bad code, model code, productivity, efficiency?
Yeah, ChatGPT improved a lot. 3 years ago, I was horrified because it was like having a sort of a semi-idiot that was always talking into my ear while I was trying to write code. Half of the times it was useful code, and half of the times it was enough code that it would really create a cognitive load on me while trying to not to listen to it and actually write the correct code. Now I have to say it has improved a lot to a very scary point in which it can not only generate code for me, but even the English commentary that goes along the code. So somewhat guessing what I'm about to write. So the difficulty is that in order to detect the errors, people need to know the basics. And so going back to my topic about the introductory courses, the problem is that in order to know the basics and be able to detect the errors, there has to be some education in which students are taught not to rely or can't have access, for at least for some tests, to ChatGPT. So I see this as an incredible productivity enhancer for students that are sophisticated enough. But to get the students there, I think it will be needed a different approach to some of our basic courses in which students are actually tested to reason with their own head, because if they don't learn that first, then to spot the errors. And so I think that will be a challenge. And specifically, I'm worried about the challenge in the relatively short time we are given this revolution of the LLMs, to turn around some of the ways in which we teach our more basic courses in a way in which we can really teach people to think with their own head, at least at the beginning. If people don't know how to do that first, then they cannot progress to detecting errors later.
Yeah, thank you so much for framing it that way. The challenges in the beginning computer science classroom, it does sound like that is the good news is that we have the TLC here and a lot of people who are willing to tackle that issue together. Luca, I also know. Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, just to expand on that with a clear example, there are beautiful ideas in mathematics that translate to simple algorithms in computer science. Those are very classical. So if you ask a question, if you start writing in English, let me solve, yeah, you will find a perfect completion, with the result that the student learns exactly nothing. So that for at least some of the basic and beautiful things, we need to find some alternative way of teaching the students that does not give them access to the LLMs, I believe. And once they pass that stage, instead, LLMs become incredible accelerators of productivity and learning because of the speed of generating code, but also because they can answer questions on, how they should have done it or approach it, or they resolve a lot of the friction inherent in writing code.
Mm-hmm. And Marcelo, to go to you, do you see a fundamental difference in the way that the LLMs are functioning and how students are learning versus using web-based resources like Stack Overflow and search-based queries?
Well, I like a lot of people, I'm becoming a regular user of LLMs, and what I find is that it quite oftentimes gives you a much quicker access to a question. For instance, a language like C++, right? It's a very complex language, and if you're writing in C++, you are all the time looking at manuals, and then you're finding these manuals are hard to read. And quite oftentimes I can ask an LLM, can you summarize this? And can you make it simpler? And it gives me feedback. And in a sense, it's kind of teaching me and filling in the blanks of what I don't know. And I think that kind of creates like an interesting paradigm, which is that in the future, there's a question of how much do you want to know and memorize? And how much do you want to say, hey, I'm willing to allow this machine to kind of fill in a lot of the blanks for me and allow me to do shortcuts into what I do, because I have a particular aim, maybe to build something, to write a program, and I can either read a thick textbook and maybe learn every detail of C++ from the beginning, or I can say, look, I've got like a basic kernel, let me learn while I work. So I think that's kind of an interesting paradigm that engineers are going to find themselves in. How much to say, I want to learn a lot, or I want to leave certain things that I can learn as I go. So I'm curious, Luca, what do you have some ideas about that? Is that, do you find that in your own case?
Yes, and
trade-off?
I'm enthusiastic about that's what I call the removal of friction. This looking up documentation all the time that I used to be doing as well. That's quite removed when you use these tools, because they suggest how to use common libraries, common functions. So for that, I have unbridled enthusiasm essentially, and the point that worries me is more the comprehension of the underlying basic algorithms. That if you want to teach them how to reason about simple algorithms on simple mathematical structures. If you ask a simple question for the student, which is the most helpful to teach them the subject, the solutions are ready for them, and so they can avoid any effort, and so that's the negative part, I would say. But the removal of friction is fantastic. I compare it to going by bike compared to going by foot. The acceleration in which of productivity is 3 or 4-fold. I notice.
Very interesting. I do get the feeling though that there is some element of friction that's inherent in the process of creativity and generation of ideas. So there, I would say that there's a bit of a tension there, but it's very interesting to hear you discuss it. Luca, I wanted to return to the other use that you mentioned, using it for feedback, to generate feedback in your classes, using these LLMs to comment on student work, student code. I was just wondering if you could describe to a non-technical audience what that looks like. And I have some more questions about that, but could you just give us a brief description of what using this to give feedback in your classroom looks like?
Yes, so students can turn in code, and the code is graded automatically according to test cases, whether it does the right thing or not. And I was always unsatisfied in the past that students would only get, the message of whether the code was correct, but no feedback on the style of the code, on whether it could be improved. And so I wrote some piece of code that essentially takes the student solution, takes the solution from the instructor, and tells an LLM, look, compare these two and give feedback to the students on these various points. I selected, style, conciseness, mathematical correctness, etc., etc. But do not provide any code and try to be as helpful and respectful as possible. And the results are really quite good. Now, I still have to tune these. I noticed, for example, that if the students write a somewhat functioning solution, they get good feedback. If their solution is badly broken, they get not very useful feedback. This is the prompting I do it needs to be tuned, but in general it works. And so I'm experimenting at low doses in it in our introductory course sequence. We're just at the beginning. This is just quite new.
Well, thank you for sharing such new and in progress experiments with us. And it's interesting that there's a certain range in which it can be useful, but then beyond that, it stops giving good feedback.
Yeah, I think it's my fault, frankly. I think it's the fault of how I set up the questions to the LLM. I think it can be improved. But, improving these is a slow work in which I look at all the silly answers they got. There is a way for students to indicate whether the answer is useful to them or not. So I need to do periodically this work of looking at the cases in which it's useless and, trying to improve my prompting.
Okay, well, I'm going to reserve my right to blame the machine in certain circumstances, but I appreciate the openness. I do know from our previous conversations that these tools are not free to use, though. And so I'm wondering what are some concerns that are raised by adopting a ChatGPT-like tool for giving student feedback? And are there also other non-monetary costs that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I gave it a lot of thought because I'm good at building websites. So I thought, I should introduce a place where students can buy, or who should pay essentially. Now it runs actually on my credit card, which is probably not an optimal thing in the long run. And so I circulated a survey to the students, would you be willing to spend money to get feedback? And the unanimous response was essentially very negative. They said not only that they did not, because of course they don't want to spend money, but also that if they did want to spend money, they felt no need of using tools the university provided, but they would have preferred, to cut and paste their questions into the standard ChatGPT, and for which they may pay a subscription and get the answers from there. So they felt no need to be sort of double billed by both the university and ChatGPT. And the general feeling I got from the responses was that they thought that the university should provide, that they were paying their tuition in order to get the feedback. And this was a sort of double dipping. And so this raised other interesting questions because I made a few calculations. Now the cost dropped, but at the beginning, when I first launched these, to give feedback to a piece of week-long homework costed me 50 cents. And so with 200 students, 50 cents per student is $100. $100 buys maybe 5 hours of tutor time. And in 5 hours, a tutor could give feedback to 100 homework submissions if quickly. The problem is that the tutor will be bored out of their mind, so in practice it may not work. But there's an interesting trade-off here. Now the cost dropped a little bit, and there is an ethical question in my mind that I don't. There is an ethical and a psychological question. The ethical question is, the dollars that go to ChatGPT are not equivalent to the dollars that go to tutors. To tutors, this is like fertilizing our own field, right? It's giving money to students who need it for living often and who benefit from the money. If we give the money to ChatGPT, then that's money that sort of leaves the UCC community and goes out of it and never comes back in terms of student support. So that's one of consideration that I have in the back of my mind. And another consideration is, the difference. The tutors are slower in giving the feedback, but they are also humans. So how is it different to the motivation of a student that has access to either automated feedback that will be, maybe very high quality and very low latency, versus somebody that actually talks to them and shows a human being's interest in the quality of the output of the work of the student? That may provide motivation not to let the tutor's expectations down. So I think it's quite complex, and at the moment we are papering over it because the costs are low and the numbers are low. But at some point, I think we will have to deal with this type of questions more at scale.
Yeah, thank you. Marcelo, anything you want to add on this idea of balancing the pedagogical system of giving student feedback through tutors versus the instantaneous nature of GPT feedback?
Well, one thing I can say is we're in the School of Engineering, right? And Alan Kay used to say the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And so we are in the business of inventing new things, right? So fortunately, large language models are open source. So there's a lot that can be done in bootstrapping some of our own tools. And it would be, this could lead to some exciting projects, open source projects to how do you grade with using LLMs. I mean, actually, there is activity of programming LLMs, and all of these are very exciting, cutting edge engineering tasks that the school is working on. So that could be one way to address the fact. I myself, I'm very pro the private, individually owned LLM, not a cloud-based service.
Mm.
And I think that's like really important, from a human standpoint. It's going to be important that we don't just train a centralized brain to replace humans. We want to basically have the idea of a human and his assistant that helps him be a little bit better engineer, not basically saying, oh, all of us engineers are going to train the computer system owned by NVIDIA or by Bill Gates or by Apple. I think we need to consider what's going to be the evolution of this technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be a person and its assistant, not a person and the trained cloud that everybody's training.
Mm. So this is really fascinating, and I'm so glad you brought up the privacy issue. I know that we've had some questions in the chat already about assuring student privacy and feeding student data into these systems, which I think your model, Marcelo, is trying to address by not being cloud-based. But could you explain a bit more about what the privacy concerns look like from the perspective of the classroom and dealing with students? Or like how you think we can integrate these privacy concerns into how we actually teach these systems in your classes?
Well, for me, I mean, this is just sort of my personal belief, is that you have to be able to divorce your LLM from the cloud. I mean, we kind of, in fact, Luca, you teach web development. I mean, we live in this world in which we all the time are interacting with the web, and then we get these ads that are feedback to exactly what we've been doing on the web, a search, something we purchased. So in a way, it's like we get no privacy at all. So I think in order to guarantee some kind of privacy, you have to understand the LLM. You have to, and it has to actually physically be isolated from the centralized. And then there should be some learning that's centralized, but there should also be something to do with the individual. And I don't know that we have that much of that kind of AI today, but I think that's what we're going to have to go to. Or I think it's going to be very hard to maintain privacy.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a little bit what got me to thinking about this. Recently I had an idea for an invention, and I want to do some searching on the patent database to see what there is. And to be honest, then I'm thinking to myself, well, in the era of AI, as I start querying some AI-based database to see what's been invented, am I not giving my idea away, right? So we need to get to a world in which people feel secure, and that's maybe part of the kind of research that should be going on.
Well, and it's so interesting to take that model of entrepreneurship or innovation from someone like yourself who has a wealth of experience in startups, and to think about how that translates to our students, but also bring that same concern and care to student learning. And it might be a little different, but I really appreciate you opening that space for consideration. Luca, anything you want to add on about these privacy concerns?
Well, yeah, well, two things. So the way I design my tools is one in which the student identity and data is never revealed, only their work. So these addresses in part, at least, the legal part, and students can decide whether to press on the button and ask for the feedback or not. So nothing forces them to do that. So it's their choice. So, that sort of takes care of the framework from a legal point of view. But from the general point of view Marcelo brings up, I have to say that I'm a pessimist. I disagree with Marcelo that we will be able to have non-cloud models. Not that they're not desirable, simply that we will be able to have them in any measure, because these models are incredibly expensive to train, very large. I don't see how they can fit in a small space. And of course, I could be proved wrong, like computers take up a whole room. Nobody will need their own personal computer. So I could be entirely wrong, proved wrong by the future. But I think that for some time, the dream of having a powerful LLMs in your pocket that are not in the cloud is not gonna be with us.
Hmm. Well, there you go, everyone. Two different perspectives on an important question. We're getting ready to bring everyone back in and open it up to a broader Q&A. So please keep the questions coming. I wanted to just pose each of you one final question before we bring everyone back. And let's start with Luca, who you have a long record of building tools that are integrated and used on this campus. What role do you see CSE faculty playing in helping this campus design LLMs or other generative AI systems that can broadly improve our teaching and learning?
Again, I don't think that our main role will be to design LLMs. I think we will be interfacing to existing LLMs in order to improve our teaching. We have better feedback. There is an enormous number of things we can do. We can provide environments where students can try out some idea and receive immediate feedback. We can provide environments in which these LLMs offer critiques, generate problems. I heard that there is a startup in Berkeley that has by students that do virtual forum question answering helped by AI. There is an incredible number of things we can do. And in fact, part of my belief is that one of the reasons I don't focus on LLMs is that computer science for a long time has had very complicated interfaces. If you want to talk to a I don't know, a large storage thing, you have to, it's very detailed. If you use one from Amazon, you cannot switch to one from Google the day after. LLMs have this funny peculiarity that you talk to them, you send them strings of English words and get back some answers. And so it's true that they're very powerful. They're also very replaceable. Also, as Marcelo underlined, by the wish of having one that we run ourselves. So, so in some way we can retain the power as experimenters, and these LLMs are quite replaceable, and we can see which one works best for the user. It's an interesting shift in power in a sense, in which LLMs become commodities. More easy to compare and more easy to switch from one to the other, I guess.
Interesting. Thank you, Luca. Marcelo, any ideas about what CSE, what role they can play on campus and helping design these tools and integrating them more broadly?
Well, one thing I'm thinking about is that relating again to the fact that there's quite a few humanities teachers. In fact, you yourself are in teaching literature, and you're interested in AI and the possibility of AI for creative writing. I think in the arts, the ability, nowadays a child can come up with an idea and say, hey, I have this idea for this, and I want it done in the style of Dali. And you can have a painting machine that all of a sudden allows that child to see one of his ideas done as Dali. So I think in a way, more integration with other departments in the school as to how these technologies are going to be used. I think that's going to be quite an exciting opportunity. Like I said, the School of Engineering, what we do is we create new things, right? That's what we pride ourselves in. And so I think we could see projects related to that in any topic, right? So I see us playing that a lot of integrating roles, a lot of bootstrapping roles, and how do you use AI in really interesting ways that can also help our school. One thing I've been thinking a little bit, like for instance, in grading a piece of code, how do you know that somebody wrote that code? Well, one way to do it is to say, please comment out this code and explain what it does. So if you understand the code, you can have your own little description what that code does. Then you could have an AI say, is this a unique description of the code, or do all these codes, are they the same? This description come from one place? So now you have an opportunity to maybe use AI to perhaps avoid cheating in a more significant way than even humans could do. That could be an application. So I see us, it's an exciting time where we're going to be developing new technologies and in an integrative way with the humanities, with history, with art, with literature, with philosophy. I think that's a possible role that could be played, maybe by including the School of Engineering.
Great. Well, that's very promising and exciting. Thank you, Marcelo. I'm going to invite the rest of our participants to join us back on screen. And we have questions coming in from the audience. Thank you so much for being here. I guess let me just start off to see if anyone, Josefina, Heather, Lance, or Michael, if you have any questions for Luca or Marcelo. No? Well, feel free to jump in if you do. I'm going to go to a question about, this is a more philosophical question about the appropriateness, capacity, and or value of the faculty's use of AI in the process of assessing student work. And so this is maybe a bit less technical, but gets to some of the questions that both Marcelo and Luca were talking about, and also returns to some of the concerns that Lance surfaced in the survey about one, notifying students that AI is going to be used in assessing their work, and broader concerns about that. So I'd just like to put that question out there. How, as faculty, should we be navigating these issues? Heather, I saw you nodding. Do you have thoughts?
I think that's an interesting question. I suppose unless it's for something, unless students are involved in it directly. So for example, I could imagine creating activities where students are getting like, just in time feedback, to use the lingo, are participating in it themselves directly, and they know that they are part of it and they're using a tool that has been created to give them feedback. I think that would be an interesting way. So for example, I could imagine creating something where students are beginning to develop research questions of a certain kind, and they are plugging their information or maybe doing a peer activity where they're working with peers to get feedback. But to have a faculty member do it, I think that does raise some bigger questions, like our panelists said. I also think that this is a labor issue that the university will need to address at some point. If we continue to get more and more students, we have fewer and fewer resources. At some point, we may use the tools that are available to us. So I think there's a lot of bigger conversations to be had here that may deserve a conversation of its own even.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in, add anything to that? Lance, did I do a fair job at representing what you pulled out of the survey? Anything you want to add?
I think so. Yeah, no, nothing to add.
Okay, I'm gonna go to another question that the the biggest issue we see with our students have been using LLMs as a way to avoid having to think critically for themselves. And so we've seen examples from this both in humanities and in computer science in this discussion. And the poster writes, I worry that even if we are teaching them to use it in good faith, this will still be probable, if not an inevitable result of using it to do less work. How can we communicate to students that they shouldn't use AI to avoid having to use their brains? Will they listen? Another way to phrase this is, what exactly is that sweet spot between efficiency and productivity and the actual hard work of learning? Luca?
Yeah, I'm a very strong believer of not forbidding students anything that they can naturally do. So I've never forbade students to look things up on the internet. You know, you never want to put student in temptation and yet tell them that they can do it. That I think is a very negative thing to do. So I think that as I said before, for the advanced courses, like Marcelo noticed and I noticed as well, we have great fruits to reap from these LLMs that eliminate a lot of the friction and enable much faster learning. And I'm beginning to think that for the basic courses, instead, we should really revert to settings in which impaired students are tested without access to them, like pencil and paper or even oral exams in some cases. Because there is a need to not just just create a very natural setting, but in which certain activities are intrinsically not possible. And what really worries me is, as was brought out also by some question in the Q&A, the conflict of scale that we have built in this campus, or in all campuses perhaps. That is, we have gone into a world in which we accommodate every student in the best way we can. Students can take exams on campus or remotely if they cannot commute to campus, or here or there. The length is variable, the media is variable. We accommodate a lot of things. And we don't have a lot of personnel, right? The student number is increasing, and to go from that to a world where people may be required to sit physically in the same classroom and use pencil and paper that needs to be gathered and somehow processed. I'm wondering, it will be a very, very, very deep switch over, I think, for some courses. I'm wondering about the resources, really.
With regards to critical thinking, it's interesting. A long time ago in a junior college, I had a philosophy 101 class. And this, I have to say, this is probably the kind of the most significant teaching that I had throughout my entire career, was taking that class. And the process the teacher would do is he would take one abstract idea, like what is a moral act, what is not a moral act, or something to do with religion, and he would take one side, and the students would have to debate him. And usually he would kind of destroy the students' arguments in responding to this one side. But then he would take the other side and he would destroy the students again. And so I'm thinking, in a way, knowledge is not critical thinking, it's just knowledge, and you can redirect it in many different ways. So in a sense, you could use a tool that has that's well read, that has a lot of tools to create that kind of activity that say, you as a student, you need to reply to this. And it can be a political argument, it can be a religious thing, it can be morals. It helps you to think critically, and which is something, ChatGPT is like a very clever parrot. It can parrot all of human thought, but human thought is frail, right? So in a way, this addresses some of the most critical issues of humankind, like how do we get along? That's the kind of critical thinking. So I think there's an opportunity to leverage this to help us do that, train kids to be critical thinkers.
I deeply appreciate the plug for humanities education. Luca, you have?
Yeah, and Marcel is very right. For example, let me talk about mathematics a moment. You can take that critical thinking attitude also to mathematics. If people were in a small classroom debating how to prove a theorem, they would certainly develop the feel for what it means to write a coherent proof and how to fix it and how to adjust it. My feel is that if we don't do that, and in the sort of, large-scale education we have at the moment, there are dangers for all fields. I was really surprised when working on mathematics theorems myself, the ability of ChatGPT to come up with very non-trivial proofs, sometimes 4 or 5 paragraph proofs that were basically correct, except for some small things I had to tweak. So I think we are deluding ourselves if we think that we can give assignments to students that they can do independently and in an unobserved environment, and learn the basic skills that ChatGPT can provide to them. I think that's going to be a difficult position to be in.
Michael?
Yeah, thanks so much for this conversation, Luca and Marcelo. I appreciate the ways you're engaging with this. And I think I'd push back a little bit. I think that there are ways that students can work with GPT in response to these really critical questions. And I really appreciate the way Jessica and also Norman have raised them. And one of the things that we're seeing in the teaching center is that one of the particular ways that we could fall back on ensuring learning and the types of assignments that we've done is engaging students in more metacognition. And we can do that in working with GPT and GPT-like tools. And so, like as Norman says, like reading reflections are often bread and butter for many courses, not just in the humanities and arts and social sciences, but beyond. And so even there, I mean, asking students, for instance, to engage with GPT to produce a writing reflection on a piece, and then having the student engage and thought about 3 things it got right and 3 things it got wrong and why it got those things wrong. Really bringing back into the picture those critical thinking and reflection skills through that type of metacognition. And so I see some real benefit and possibility in using it. And, I want to be really hesitant to not move back into environments. And Professor Amy Badali brought this up earlier, where we're relying on in-person and timed and observed and pen and paper. These are approaches to doing assessment that are problematic for students with academic accommodations.
Well, yeah, very, very, very important to bring that up. And we have, I think we've seen a full panorama of the issues from different disciplines. It's been very, very enlightening to hear how these tools are showing up in our different classrooms. And I just want to thank all of our panelists and participants here today, everyone that has made this event possible. I want to make one final plug to consider joining the AI learning community in the spring. Michael, any final thoughts?
Just really grateful for all the presenters who gave their time for this. Thank you so much to share what you're learning with the larger community. And thank you so much to all the educators and the community beyond UC Santa Cruz who joined us for this event.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you.